Bedtime Reading. The Turn of the Screw. Chapter 1. It was in the library of a large old house on the day before Christmas that I heard the story you are about to read. Many of my friends and I had gathered together at a home outside town to spend a few days celebrating the holiday. In the evening, following an old tradition, we began to tell stories. A man named Griffin started with a story about a young boy who saw a ghost while lying in bed. The boy immediately tried to wake his mother so that she, too, could see what he was seeing. The ghost, however, had disappeared by the time she opened her eyes. Everyone at the party listened without saying a word. They were terribly frightened by the idea of a ghost bothering a child. It made the story twice as interesting, and it made them twice as afraid. After the story had finished, I noticed that my friend Douglas seemed troubled by something. Then, putting his drink down on the table before him, he told everyone that he also had a story to tell. If you thought Griffin's story was frightening, wait until you hear what I have to tell you, he said. In my story, a ghost visits not just a little boy, but a young girl too. I promise you that you've never heard anything like it before.
Oh, it sounds so terribly interesting,
commented one woman. Yes, old boy, do continue, said another guest. Douglas's face became serious, and he looked almost everyone in the eye before speaking. I'm the only one who knows this story. Believe me, very few people can hear it and not be very upset by it. Good. That's all the more reason to tell us, I said. Everyone in the room laughed, except for Douglas, who just put his hand on the back of his head. He seemed to be thinking about whether or not he should tell us. He walked back and forth in front of the fireplace, and then stood looking out of the window for a moment before turning around to speak. I'm sorry, but I couldn't possibly tell you this without the story in front of me. I have it on paper at home. Everyone cried out in disappointment. If you want to hear it so badly, you'll have to wait until my servant brings it from my home in the city. I can send him a message this evening. Yes, please do, many people said. Is this the story about something that happened to you? I then asked. No, my goodness, no, he replied. But then how are you the only person to know the story? Did someone tell you and you wrote it down yourself? I read the story in a letter that was sent to me by a woman many years ago, he answered. Comments came from the crowd suggesting that it was an old lover or girlfriend. Douglas smiled at this and admitted that he had liked the woman. However, she had been much too old for him. She died 20 years ago, a very wonderful woman indeed, he added. I met her during one of my summer breaks in college. She taught my sister in our parents' home. Occasionally, she and I would walk together and chat. I found her very interesting and intelligent. The story you'll be hearing happened many years before I had met her. I'm certain that I was the only person she ever told. It sounds like she liked you very much, I said. I know what you are thinking, but it was not at all like that. She liked me, but she was not in love with me. She had been in love before, and that is part of the story. And when can we expect to hear this story? I asked. I should have the letter by tomorrow evening, he answered. Shall we gather in the library again tomorrow after dinner? Who will come? Most of the people present said that they would definitely be there. However, Mrs. Griffin wanted to know more about the story before agreeing to devote another evening to storytelling.
Can you tell us who her lover was?
She asked. We'll find that out when we hear the story, I said. No, I'm afraid that even after you've heard the whole thing, it may not be very obvious who she was in love with, Douglas replied. He then got up from his chair and announced that it was time for him to go to bed. I'll see you all tomorrow, he said, and then left the room. After hearing his bedroom door close, Mrs. Griffin said,
It's clear to me that he was in love with this woman.
My God! He has kept this a secret for so many years. It's quite special that we get to hear about it for the first time tomorrow, I said. I'm very much looking forward to it. Everyone else said that they were equally excited. I then told my friends good night and went to bed. The following day, a package arrived for Douglas from his home. In the evening after dinner, we all once again met in the library. A few of the ladies from the night before, however, could not attend, for they had scheduled appointments that could not be cancelled. It was good that they did not stay, because I fear how the story might have affected them. In addition to this, the fewer people present made the storytelling seem more special and mysterious. Douglas, before reading the letter, prepared us for the story with important information that was not included in the woman's writing. He began by explaining that the woman had been a 20-year-old school teacher when she went for a job interview at a home in London. The man who interviewed her was a very handsome and wealthy young fellow. His charming manner made her like him very much. Even though she did not know him, she felt that she would do almost anything that he asked her to. The man explained to her that his parents had recently died in India, and as a result, he had now become responsible for the care of his niece and nephew. His brother, their father, had died recently, so they no longer had anyone to raise them. The young man did not feel he could do a good job taking care of them, so he had them sent to his home in Essex, where the housekeeper there, Mrs. Groves, was in charge. The schoolteacher was told that the children needed a tutor. They had had a woman teaching them before. However, she died. Then they had no choice but to send Miles, the young boy, to school. The girl, Flora, was younger and still spent all day at home. Altogether, there were 5 people working at the home: a cleaning woman, a cook, a man to care for the house, a man to care for the garden, and a milkwoman. "Excuse me, but I must ask a question," interrupted one of the listeners. "How did the first teacher die?" "You'll find out later on," Douglas answered. He then went on to explain that she took the job, even though there were several things that worried her. First of all, the position sounded very lonely. Secondly, it also sounded like a lot of responsibility. She would be the master of the entire house. And lastly, the young man told her that he never wanted to be contacted by her. Any problems that might arise had to be taken care of by her alone. She agreed to this, and it was clear to her that the young man felt suddenly very easy.
"There must have been something romantic between her and that young fellow,"
said one woman. "They only saw each other 2 times. There was no opportunity for any development of a relationship." Douglas stopped for a moment to think, and then began again. Other people had applied and interviewed for the position. Most of them, however, could not accept being alone and having no support from the family. This woman also found the details of the job strange, but it paid so much more than she had ever made before. In the end, she decided to take the job. And that is everything you need to know. The actual story will begin tomorrow evening, for it's much too late to begin telling it now. With that, he left the room and went to bed. When Douglas appeared in the library the next evening, he had a book in his hands instead of a letter. It appeared to be a diary. He sat down in a comfortable leather chair, opened the book, and began to read it aloud. Chapter 2. From the beginning, I had good and bad feelings about the job. Sometimes I thought that it had been foolish of me to accept. I especially felt this way while traveling to the children's home that first day. But my mood became brighter the further I got away from the city. When we finally arrived at the house, I remember being happy with what I saw. I had planned for the place to be very lonely and sad. However, it looked very cheerful from the outside, and I could see two seemingly friendly house cleaners watching as our carriage approached. The garden was beautiful and well taken care of. After getting out of the carriage, I was met at the front door by a woman with a little girl standing next to her. They were both extremely polite. I was happy for the whole evening. I met Flora, the younger of the two children. She was very sweet and extremely pretty. It surprised me that the young man who interviewed me had not mentioned anything about her prettiness. When they showed me my bedroom, I could not believe the size of it. It was huge. I had never seen such a comfortable and luxurious room in my life, and now it was mine to enjoy on my own. It was good to see that the head housekeeper, Mrs. Groves, was very friendly. I had been worried that we might not get along. However, I was surprised by how happy she seemed to be that I had come. It was as though she felt easier somehow. I chose not to think much about it. I was too happy with everything else to let it bother me. When I went to bed, the little girl's beauty gave me something to look forward to the next morning. I planned to get out of bed very early and enjoy the view from my window. That night, however, I found myself listening to the silence within the house. It was difficult for me to sleep, because several times I thought I could hear all kinds of things: a child crying in the distance, a gentle footstep outside my door. Eventually, I grew tired and managed to fall asleep. The next day, I woke up excited to begin my work and take care of Flora. I even talked with her about having her bed moved to my bedroom. In fact, I wanted very much to completely replace Mrs. Groves as her caregiver. The little girl was quite shy, however, so we decided to give her time to get used to me. I was certain that she would like me very much, and Mrs. Groves seemed pleased and proud of the way that I admired the young girl.
What about her brother? Is he just as beautiful and sweet?
I asked.
Oh, yes. He's just as wonderful and charming,
she replied, looking proudly at the girl eating across from us at the dinner table.
My goodness! I hope that I don't too easily fall in love with these children. It's my habit, you know. Anyway, I hear that the boy is supposed to return home from school tomorrow. No, he'll be here on Friday. Oh, then I shall plan to meet him with his little sister when he arrives. Would he like that?
I asked. Mrs. Groves thought that this was a wonderful idea. She and I seemed to think almost perfectly alike. I could tell that she was happy to have me in the house. The following morning, I found myself feeling nervous and uncomfortable. The house was so large and unfamiliar to me. I guessed that it would take quite a long time to get used to. Along with these feelings, I also felt proud to have gotten this job and looked forward to beginning the children's lessons. The idea then came to me to have Flora give me a tour of the home and surrounding area. In this way, I thought, we could get to know one another better. She was very happy to be my guide. I got to know every room and hiding place in the house. And just as I had hoped, we became good friends almost immediately. Following her around, I was surprised by how little fear she felt when entering dark, empty rooms and hallways. I certainly would have feared them on my own. The result was that I ended up feeling as though I were in a huge castle, much larger and more interesting and beautiful than any other mentioned in children's books. And yet now, when I think about it, it was just an unattractive old home. Chapter 3. That first day had been very exciting. It filled me with all kinds of hope for the future. I was very eager about meeting the boy the following day. However, something happened that evening that made me less comfortable with the situation. Before dinner, Mrs. Groves gave me a letter from the boy's school. Although she had not read it, she did not seem happy that it had come.
It's from the leader of his school. A very unpleasant and boring man. I have no interest at all in what he has to say about our boy, Miles.
I took the envelope upstairs to my bedroom and, after changing into my evening bedclothes, opened it. As soon as I read it, I wished that I had waited until the next morning to open it. It made me very upset and I could not sleep the whole night. The next day, I decided to go to Mrs. Groves first thing in the morning and share the news with her.
The school will no longer accept Miles as their student. Are you sure about this?
She asked.
The school always sends the children home during holiday. It's very clear in the letter that he is never to return to the school,
I said. Her eyes then became watery.
Why would they do this? Has he done something wrong?
I held out the letter to her to take and read herself, but she would not accept it.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't want to read it.
I realized then that Mrs. Groves was not able to read. I felt guilty for having embarrassed her. In order to avoid further uncomfortable feelings, I asked,
What sort of child is Miles? Is he a good boy? What does the school say exactly?
She asked, her eyes still red and full of water.
They did not say what exactly was wrong. He is simply no longer allowed to attend their school. I can only guess that there must have been a problem with him and the other students.
Mrs. Groves' eyes then grew wide and her face turned a little red.
Ha! Not our Miles!
I do not know why exactly, but I responded to this cry as though I knew Miles as well as she did.
Can you believe it? The school acts like none of the other students are problems themselves. How can they treat a little boy so terribly? He's not even 10 yet,
added Mrs. Groves.
You will meet him tomorrow. Then you will know what kind of boy he really is. Just look at how sweet and wonderful his little sister is. Do you think her brother could be so different?
I looked about the room and found Flora where I had left her, working at a little desk in the classroom. Now, however, she had stopped practicing her writing and was simply looking at me in a very gentle and childish way. I was so moved by her purity that I immediately ran over to her and put my arms around her. Tears of guilt came into my eyes for doubting the goodness of her brother. From that time, I grew more and more eager to meet the young boy. All day, I looked for an opportunity to speak more with Mrs. Groves about him. However, she never seemed available. As evening approached, I began to think that she was keeping away from me on purpose. Finally, I managed to meet her alone as she was coming downstairs from the second floor. I stopped in front of her and, looking her in the eyes, said,
"From the way you speak about Miles, it seems that you have never seen him behave badly." "Well, I didn't mean to make you think that,"
she replied.
"So, has he been bad before?" "Of course he has, I'm happy to say,"
she said with a challenging look.
"You're pleased with this bad behavior?"
I asked.
"It's quite natural, isn't it? I don't think I'd like a child that was completely good. How boring."
I thought about this for a moment.
"I agree with you. However, it's not good if the boy is so bad that he causes other boys to be bad as well."
She laughed a little at this and said,
"Do you fear that he'll make you bad?"
I decided not to let this comment bother me and laughed with Mrs. Groves. However, the next day, just before going to meet Miles, my worries returned, and I asked Mrs. Groves about the teacher that had worked with the children before me.
"She was very much like yourself, young and very attractive,"
she answered.
"It seems that the young man who hired me likes his employees to be this way,"
I commented.
Yes, it was true. He almost always hired the youngest and prettiest people.
I was confused. Why was she using the past tense to speak about her boss? She acted as though he were dead. She must have noticed the look of confusion on my face, for she then corrected herself.
"I mean, it's true. He does like pretty women." "Were you talking about someone else at first?"
I asked, still confused. Her face changed a little. She seemed uncomfortable for a moment and then said,
"No, I was just talking about my master. No one else." "Did the teacher before me ever have a problem with Miles?" "If she did, she never said anything to me about it." "Do you think that she watched him closely?"
I asked.
"Well, yes. I mean, she was very good with the children in some ways." "You mean there were some things that were not good?" "I'm sorry, but she's dead now, and I'd rather not judge her." "Yes, of course,"
I said. However, my curiosity was too great to prevent me from asking,
"Where did she die exactly?" "Not here. She died elsewhere."
I could not understand why Mrs. Groves was not saying much about her. Elsewhere? Where did she go? I decided to question her a little more about it.
"So she must have become very sick. Did her family come and take her back to their home to care for her?" "No, she simply went away on vacation. She had been working for us long enough that she needed a break. I remember the master one day telling me that she had died." "But how did she die?" "I was never told. Really, I'd rather not speak much more about it,"
she said.
"I have to prepare for the young boy's return."
Chapter 4. Mrs. Gross's rudeness toward me did not prevent us from being friendly with one another after our talk. When we saw each other again, after I had brought Miles home from the station, we got along quite well. Part of the reason for this was my feeling towards the young boy. When I first caught sight of him at the station, I had a similar moment to the one when I first saw little Flora. He too was extremely handsome. All of my fears and worries about him immediately left me then. Never in my life had I ever seen a child so special. He seemed so sweet and pure. I could feel only love for him. It seemed impossible to me that he could have been thrown out of his school. I felt truly angry with the leader who had sent the letter. I expressed my feelings to Mrs. Groves.
"How could they do such a thing? There's nothing at all wrong with the boy." "I know. It's truly horrible,"
she replied.
What will you do? I've decided not to bother answering the school with a letter of my own. I've nothing to say to those people,
I said angrily.
And will you say anything to the boy's uncle, the man who hired you? No, I won't,
I cried.
What about the boy? Will you mention anything to him about it? Not a word. Wonderful. Together we'll support the boy and help him through this difficult little period of time. Yes, we'll do that,
I said, offering my hand to shake in agreement. We stood shaking hands for a moment, smiling very happily into one another's faces. Mrs. Groves was so pleased that she asked for permission to kiss me.
Of course,
I said, pulling her toward me and giving her a big hug. We were like the best friends at that moment. Remembering those days when I first began my work with the children, I find it hard to believe the way that I let myself be influenced so easily. I was full of feeling for this boy, and there was no doubt in my mind that I could help him. I do not even remember the kind of classes that I had planned to teach him. Both of the children were extremely polite and easygoing. I was completely charmed by them. As a result, I became a less effective teacher. My image of them in the future was no different from the time I was teaching them. They seemed to me as if they would never grow older. They would never leave this beautiful castle of theirs or its gardens. Our lessons, therefore, became easier than I was used to, and we ended up spending a very pleasant summer together. Of course, now in looking back, that peaceful time seems more like the quiet before a storm. At the beginning, I could always find time to rest at the end of the day, after they had gone to bed. During that time, I would walk outside around the gardens and listen to the birds sing just before the sun had completely gone down. I felt proud to be the master in such a lovely place. It felt good to be serving the wishes of that handsome young man who had hired me. Now he would no longer have to worry about the children. They were safe and being taught well. It was a secret wish of mine, during these walks, to find a man one day in the garden. I knew it was silly and impossible, but I still wished for it to happen. I imagined that this man would smile at me, and that this smile would mean that he understood how good a woman I was. Then it happened on one evening in June. I actually did see a man. However, instead of being in the garden, he was up in one of the 2 towers that stood on each side of the house. I was so frightened to see him there, I almost cried out. He was a complete stranger. I did not recognize him at all. In that moment, it seemed that everything around me had died. No longer could I hear the birds singing. No longer did the wind blow. The sun had not yet gone down and the sky was still a warm yellow. I looked more carefully and found that I had not been imagining things. There was indeed a man looking down at me from the tower. I tried to think if there was anyone I had not yet met who worked at this house. I was pretty sure that I had met everyone. I was not close enough to say anything to him, to ask him who he was and what he was doing up there. He stood, leaning forward, with his hands on the railing that surrounded the top of the tower. Then he suddenly straightened and slowly walked to another part of the tower, never once taking his eyes away from me. He stopped and stared some more. After a short while, he disappeared into the tower, and I did not see him any more that day. Chapter 5. By the time I arrived back at the house, the sun had completely gone down and night had settled upon the land. I was troubled. Who was this man? Was he a crazy family member I had not been told about? Immediately I looked for Mrs. Groves, hoping she could tell me who this person was. When I found her, she immediately expressed how worried she had been about me, for I had been out much later than usual. I suddenly lost the desire to tell her what I had seen. I did not want to frighten her. For the next 3 days, my worries increased. I could not understand why that man had been there, and because I could not explain it to myself, my fear grew larger than before. It was possible that the servants might have been playing a trick on me. But no one behaved unusually towards me. No laughing could be heard, and no strange looks were given. Finally, I managed to get myself to believe that it was just some impolite stranger who wanted to look at the old house. He must have just climbed the tower without asking for permission. Only the rudest people would behave in such a way. That then explained the way that he had looked at me for so long. This comforted me a little, for it would mean that he would probably never come back again. I decided to try to forget about the man by working harder on the children's lessons. I truly enjoyed teaching them. I never once felt tired of my job. Most teachers lose interest in their students after just a short time, but I found them as charming as always. Every class I would learn something new about each of my beautiful young students. I could not, however, learn why the boy had been dismissed from his school. I decided that he had probably done nothing wrong. It was likely that other children had been jealous of his beauty and intelligence, and then told lies to the teacher about him. It was possible that the leader of the school might have been jealous of him too. Young Miles was simply too good for them. And yet, Miles seemed so happy and sweet. I had never met another child like him in all the days of my teaching. This made me doubt the possibility that the other children had treated him badly. Surely, he would have been a sadder child if they had. The idea of Miles himself being a badly behaved boy seemed impossible, too. I was always with him during the day and early evening. Nothing ever seemed wrong with him. Not once did he ever mention the school or any of his friends or teachers. I, of course, feeling so angry with the school, never said a word about it either. The effect that Miles and Flora had on me was simply magical. I always felt wonderful around them. Nothing could upset me. Even the unhappy letters I received from my family, talking about their many problems at home, did not make me feel bad. One Sunday, it rained so hard and for so long that it made it impossible to go to church. Mrs. Groves and I then decided that if the weather improved, we would go in the evening. Eventually, it did stop raining, and I prepared to go. As I was coming downstairs to meet my companion at the front door, I remembered a pair of gloves that I had recently repaired. There had been an embarrassing hole in one of the fingers, so one of the servants offered to sew it for me. After finishing the job, the servant told me she had left the gloves in one of the dining room chairs. I decided that this would be a good opportunity to wear them again, so I went into the dining room to get them. When I entered the dining room to look for them, I immediately saw a man standing outside the window across from me. It was the same stranger I had seen in the tower. He was looking directly at me. He looked exactly like he had before, only now he was much closer. I felt that I could not move, and a cold feeling ran through my body. Although I was very afraid, it seemed to me that I was looking at someone familiar. In fact, I had the strange feeling that I had known him my whole life. Our eyes met for a few seconds, and then he turned away. I continued to watch him. He seemed uninterested in me, and began to look at other parts of the house. it quickly became clear to me that he was looking for someone. Being the master of the house, a natural desire to protect the children came over me. Immediately, I ran back into the hallway and out the front door of the house. When I went around the corner to meet him, I found no one there. He had completely disappeared. I felt glad that he had gone, for as brave as I was to face him, I still felt terribly frightened. I then waited for him to return. I do not know how long I stood there. I remember looking about the land and feeling certain that none of the trees or bushes were hiding him. He was gone. The idea then came to me to go to the window I had seen him standing outside of. I walked to the window and looked inside, just as he had done. Mrs. Groves happened to walk into the dining room just then and, seeing me in the window, had the same fright that I had experienced only a few moments before. It was like history repeating itself again. I noticed her face as it changed to white, and wondered to myself if mine had done the same thing when I saw the man. I then watched her do exactly as I had done. She stood for a moment, her eyes looking into mine. Then she walked back into the hallway and through the front door of the house. As I waited for her to round the corner to meet me, I thought to myself, should she be as frightened as I had been? Chapter 6.
What is wrong with you?
She asked as she came around from the front of the house. Her face was red now, and she was breathing very heavily. I waited for her to get closer before speaking.
Wrong? Does something seem wrong with me? You look terribly frightened. Your face is white as a ghost.
I thought for a moment before speaking. I could no longer keep my fear a secret in order to protect her. I had to tell. I held out my hand to her as she took it in her own. It felt safe having her so near me.
I know that we have planned to go to church this evening, but I'm afraid that I can no longer go.
Something's wrong?
She asked.
I must tell you why I look so strange now. My goodness, you really frightened me when I saw you in the window. Well, the same thing happened to me only a few minutes before. What I saw, however, was much more frightening than what you saw.
Her hand took a stronger hold of mine.
What did you see? I saw a stranger, a man. A man? I did not recognize him. Well, where has he gone? I have no idea. Was this the first time you'd seen him? No, I saw him once before. He was standing up in one of the towers. And you're sure you don't know who he is? I'm certain I've never met this man. Why didn't you mention this before? I just decided it would be best not to say anything. And you've only seen him in the tower. And at this window, of course. Why was he up in the tower?
She wondered.
Who knows? He was just watching me.
Mrs. Groves stood thinking for a moment.
Could he have been a gentleman? I'm pretty sure that he is not.
I answered right away.
Could it be someone from the little nearby town? He does not seem like anyone I have met either around here or in town. I can't imagine who it would be. He's terrible. Whoever he is.
I said, beginning to get angry. Once again, Mrs. Groves became silent and looked about the yard. She then turned back to me and said,
Well, you and I ought to go to church now. Oh, I really don't think that I can go now. I'm not in the mood. It might make you feel a little better. But the children... What do you mean? I mean that he might try to hurt them. You really think so? I don't know anything about this man, but I do know that he's strange enough to come walking onto our property without any permission. He can look into our windows as though it's his own home. There's no way I can just walk away now and put the children in possible danger.
I then saw something in Mrs. Gross's face that seemed to indicate that a new idea had come to her. I did not know what this idea was, but it seemed she might be willing to share her thoughts with me. She then asked,
When exactly did you see him before? About a couple of weeks ago, at the same time of day as today. So there wasn't much light then for you to see clearly. No, the sun had not gone down yet. I could see him very clearly. But I can't see a way for him to have entered our property. Nor can I see a way for him to leave our property without anyone knowing. But he did. So it seems that he limits his behavior to just watching. So far, yes, but that could very easily change.
Mrs. Groves no longer held my hand in hers. She had released it and begun to look around the yard again.
You go ahead to church,
I suggested.
I'll stay here and protect the house.
She stood very still.
Are you really afraid that he might hurt the children?
I looked into her eyes for a moment.
Don't you have the same fear?
She did not reply, but walked over to the window and looked inside.
Was he here for very long?
She asked.
He was standing there when I walked into the dining room. I don't know how long he had been there, but he left as soon as I came running to meet him.
She then turned around and, looking at the ground, said,
I wouldn't have been able to leave the house like you did. Normally, I wouldn't either. But I so feared for the safety of the children. I had to do it. I should feel the same way. Can you describe him to me? Yes, of course. He's quite strange looking. How so? Well, first of all, he never wears a hat.
I immediately noticed a change in Mrs. Gross's face then. She seemed to recognize something. I then continued.
He has a long white face, and his hair is red and curly. It's, however, his eyes that I remember most clearly. They're small, but very serious, and above them are thick, dark eyebrows that seem to be very expressive. He looks like he could be an actor. That's interesting,
said Mrs. Groves.
He seemed quite tall and strong. He's definitely not a gentleman, though.
Mrs. Groves had once again turned white while listening to my description, and her eyes had grown quite large. She did not seem to know what to say.
You seem upset. Does he sound familiar to you?
I asked.
Would you say that he's an attractive man?
She asked. It seemed that she wanted me to think he was, so I answered,
Oh, yes, very. And how was he dressed? I could see that the clothing he wore did not belong to him. They were nice clothes, but they were clearly someone else's. Of course! They belonged to the master of the house!
She cried out.
Ah! So you do recognize him?
She seemed almost helpless to speak, but after a few moments managed to say,
It's Peter Quint, the master's former servant. When was this? He worked here last year. I remember some of the master's clothing disappearing at times, and Quint did not own a hat. The master left for India, and that meant that Quint was the boss of the house. The boss? But why didn't the children's uncle mention him to me? As far as I know, I'm meant to be the boss here. Yes, you are. Quint left. Where did he go? Who can know? Death took him. What?
I cried.
You say he died?
She then looked up into the air above me at nothing, seeming thoughtful.
Yes, He's quite dead.
Chapter 7. Neither Mrs. Groves nor I went to church that evening. Instead, together, we headed to the room I used to give lessons to the children. We were both quite upset by the new discovery we had just made. As soon as the door was closed behind us, we both began to pray and cry. Once we had calmed down enough, we then talked some more about the situation and told each other what we knew about it. I was the only person in the entire house who had seen the man, and yet Mrs. Groves did not doubt that it was true. She did not once accuse me of being crazy or ill. I was truly surprised by how understanding and gentle she became toward me. We decided to deal with the problem together. Promises were made to do whatever we had to do to protect the children and one another. And at the end of our conversation, I found myself feeling less frightened and much stronger than before.
You're sure he was searching for somebody other than yourself? I know who he wanted now.
Suddenly, very clear in my mind.
He wanted to find poor Miles. What makes you think that?
She asked.
I'm sure of it. There's no doubt that it was Miles that he wanted,
I said, getting more and more anxious.
And I think that you understand this too.
Mrs. Groves did not argue with me. Instead, she asked,
Do you think that Miles can see him like you see him? I think that is the man's purpose.
A look of terrible fear came over the housekeeper's face.
Little Miles? I don't think it's only Miles that he wants to be seen by. I think he also wants Flora to see him.
I was determined then to be the only one to see the man. I had to protect the children in any way that I could, and make sure that they never met him. I remembered saying to Mrs. Groves,
I'm surprised that the children haven't said anything about Peter Quint, about when he had worked here and spent time with them. Well, Flora is too young to remember. Besides, we never told her. What do you mean? You never told her about his death? But surely Miles remembers him quite well. Oh, please, don't mention that man to him. You mustn't be so frightened,
I said, giving her a serious look. Then I thought about it a bit more and said,
You know, it is very strange. What? The way he never talks about that man? Yes, I mean, you told me earlier tonight that the boy and the man were very close friends when he worked here. I would think that the man's name would have been mentioned at least once during my time with Miles. But not a single word has ever been spoken about it. When I say friends, I meant that Quint showed the boy special attention. I don't know exactly how Miles felt about him, but it was clear that Quint liked the boy very much. He had no sense of what was proper, that man. You mean he wasn't proper with our little Miles?
I asked, feeling suddenly very ill in my stomach.
He wasn't proper with anyone,
she replied. I thought about this for a while. He may not have been well behaved, this Peter Quint fellow, but until now his name had never been mentioned by anyone in my presence. It comforted me a little that there was no horrible history or talk around town about the house or the children's family. Obviously, nothing too serious had happened before. As Mrs. Groves was preparing to leave the classroom, I asked her before she reached the door,
So, are you sure that Quint was a bad man? I must know, for it's extremely important. I was aware of his badness, but the children's father was not. Not everyone could see Quint's true nature. You didn't mention anything to the children's father? He refused to listen to people when they had only bad things to say about others. If he liked a person, then it was enough to satisfy him that they were good.
This seemed very believable. From what I had heard about the old master, he liked to avoid trouble, especially in his home. However, I was still upset with Mrs. Groves.
I'd have gone to him and told him everything. There's no doubt about it. I felt guilty about not saying anything. But you don't know how frightened I was. Frightened? Why? Quint could very easily hurt people. He was smart, and he did not forgive people easily. But you weren't afraid of how he might influence the children? Wasn't that a greater fear than the fear you had for your own safety? His influence?
She said, looking very hurt.
Yes. Those children could not protect themselves. You were their only protector. You were the only one who could have helped them. I could not have helped. Their father liked Quint. He trusted him. If I had said anything to the master, I would simply have lost my job. Nothing would have changed here.
I was sure that there was something that Mrs. Groves was not telling me. She knew something more, but she was too afraid to say anything to me about it. I could not stop thinking about it all week long. At night, as I lay in bed, sleep was made impossible by the image I had in my mind of Peter Quint living and working here at the house. I thought about how horrible a time that must have been for the children. It upset me greatly. The way he had died made his character seem all the more bad. A worker had discovered his body one early morning. He was lying in the middle of the road that ran between the house and the nearby village. People had seen him drinking a lot at the pub the night before. He had a head injury that seemed to indicate that he had fallen on the icy road. Having learned about all of this, I now felt that the job I had been asked to do was a very difficult one, and I decided to do my best to succeed better than the women before me had. I did not once doubt that I should do this. Never did the idea to leave the house enter my mind. I am quite proud to say this, actually. The children were in danger, and they had no one to help them. I was their only hope, and they were my only hope. I would act like a human wall. I would see everything so that they could see nothing. From that time forward, I watched them very closely. I observed their every move and word to see if there was any sign of Quint in them. And eventually, I did see something. I first noticed something while I was with little Flora one afternoon. Instead of going outside with us, Miles had asked to be allowed to finish reading a book he was very interested in. I, of course, approved of this. It is, after all, seldom that a child will prefer reading to running about in the sunshine. Flora, on the other hand, was very happy to accompany me on my walk around the property. As we walked, the sun was at its highest point in the day. I noticed how much Flora tried to be like her older brother. Both children never demanded all of my attention. They could play on their own quite easily and happily, and yet they never seemed too cold to me either. The result was that we could be together without bothering each other at all. I could be in my own little world, and Flora could be in hers, and still, we would be aware of one another. Occasionally, they would include me in their little world and imagine that I was a princess or queen or something. On this day, I couldn't remember what Flora thought I was. I just remembered her calling the lake we walked around the Caspian Sea, for we had recently been studying world maps. I remembered that I had sat down to rest a bit under the cool shadow of a tree next to the lake. I had begun to work on a sweater I was sewing for the coming winter, when I suddenly felt that someone was with Flora and me. I then looked across the sea and saw someone standing there watching us. There was no doubt about what I saw, for the day was still very bright. Immediately, I began to try and think who it might be. There were plenty of workers at the house, who very easily could have appeared in the yard. It could have been the mailman or boy from the village. I did not look directly at the person, for I was afraid. Instead, I looked down at my sewing and continued to do my work. Then I heard Flora become silent for a very short moment. I looked up and found her turning slowly away from the lake. Then she began to play again. I watched her to see if she showed any other indications of having noticed the person. I completely expected her to stop playing again and stare over at the stranger. However, she did not. Instead, she found a small, flat piece of wood with a hole in it. She then tried filling the hole with several different sticks in order to make something that looked like a boat. Then she took it over to the water and set it down to sail. I returned my eyes to the sweater in my hands and then, gaining as much courage as I could, managed to look in the direction of our visitor. Chapter 8. Afterward, I went to find Mrs. Groves. I couldn't remember how I passed the time between sitting by the lake and finding her. I just remember putting my arms around the housekeeper as soon as I found her and shouting,
"The children have seen them! It's terrible!" "What are you talking about?"
she asked.
"I was with Flora just now near the lake. I watched her, and I know that she could see the stranger." "Did she say anything to you about it?"
she asked, suddenly looking very upset.
"No, that's what upsets me most of all. She acted like she didn't see anything. My God, she's just a little 8-year-old child, and she's keeping such secrets. But if she didn't say anything about it, how can you be sure that she saw it? It was obvious. I could see very clearly that she knew she was there." "She? Don't you mean he?" "No, it was a woman,"
I cried.
"Oh, she looked so frightening. Her skin was terribly white, and she wore all black clothing. She stood watching Flora from the opposite side of the lake. I can't tell you how horrible she looked. But where did she come from? Who knows? From the same place I suppose that man comes from." "Did she walk any closer to you?"
No, but she did not need for me to be so frightened.
The housekeeper seemed to become troubled for a moment.
"Is she someone you've seen before?" "I've never seen her, but it's obvious that the child knows her. And therefore you must be familiar with her as well. I can only guess that it's Miss Jessel, the teacher I replaced." "What? How? Why is this so unbelievable to you?"
Mrs. Groves did not seem to know what to do at that moment. She looked all around her as though she wanted to go somewhere, but she did not move.
"How do you know it's her?"
I became upset with her then.
"If you don't believe me, then go and talk with Flora about it,"
I yelled. Then, after taking a moment to calm down, I said,
"I suppose that would be a bad idea. I don't think she would tell you the truth. She would pretend to have not seen anything. But why would she lie? So she can continue to hide it from us. It's quite bad behavior, I must say. But..."
Mrs. Groves looked even more troubled and confused.
"Is it such a problem that the children aren't bothered by it? Maybe they actually like seeing them. How can they like it? Especially Flora, who's so young." "But doesn't that just show how little she understands? If she doesn't understand it, then she must not mean to be bad." "Yes, I hope that what you say is correct. I pray that it is. That woman is truly terrible. Explain to me how you knew it was Miss Jessel."
said Mrs. Groves as she looked down at the floor.
You believe me then? You think it was her too?
I asked.
Just explain to me, please,
she said again.
I just knew by looking at her that it was Miss Jessel. I just knew it. Did she look at you? No. Her evil eyes never looked away from Flora. Did it seem like she hated Flora? It was different from hate. Much worse than hate. What can be worse than hate? Her looks seemed to show some kind of plan. Plan?
Mrs. Groves repeated, turning white.
I think she wants Flora. I think she wants to take her. And I think that Flora knows this. Oh, how terrible! Take her?
Mrs. Groves then walked over to the window and, looking outside, asked,
So she wore all black? It seemed like the type of clothing people wear to remember someone who has recently died. And although she looked terribly evil, she was also extremely beautiful. She seemed like she had been a very special woman. Yes, in fact, she was. She and Peter Quint were both very special, but not in any good way. Mrs. Groves,
I said, walking over to her and putting her hand in mine.
I understand why you did not say anything about this before. There was no need to. Now, however, things are different, and I feel that you must share with me everything that you know about this house and its history.
Mrs. Groves seemed to agree to this, but she still remained silent.
Please, tell me, how did Miss Jessel die? Did she have a romantic relationship with Quint? Ha! Of course there was! But they were from different social levels. They were completely different. She was well educated, a proper woman. I knew that about her when I saw her,
I said.
He, however, was nothing compared to her. He was only a servant.
I felt a little uncomfortable saying anything now, for Mrs. Groves was also a servant and from the lower end of society.
He was an absolutely bad man,
she continued.
I'd never met anyone else like him. He did not feel the need to behave properly. He did whatever he wanted. He did what he wanted with Miss Jessel? With everyone!
I remembered that look in Miss Jessel's eyes that had so frightened me.
She must have let him do what he wanted. She must have wanted it as well. Yes, that's true. And my goodness, what a heavy price she paid for wanting it. So it seems that you know exactly what happened to her. No, in fact, I know nothing about what happened. I wished to know, but I never found out. In the end, I was just happy that she had decided to leave the house and get away from it all. So you must have known something of her life here? Of her relationship with Quint? I only knew that they had a relationship. I knew nothing more about it. It was clear to me that she was not happy. That was all. I can only guess as to how horrible it had been for her. I guess it was even more horrible than you imagine,
I said. My whole body showed at that moment how sad and helpless I was feeling. Mrs. Groves could see this sadness in me, and she came over and put her arms around me. Tears came to my eyes, and I began to cry loudly into her shoulder.
There's nothing I can do to help them. They are already gone from us.
Chapter 9. Although what I had said was quite true, I had not really given up the fight. Mrs. Groves and I agreed that the best thing was to keep calm. If we could not save the children, we might at least be able to save ourselves. Later that night, Mrs. Groves and I met again in my bedroom. She was still feeling a little unsure about what or whom I had really seen, but I regained her confidence by describing very specific details about the appearance of the man and woman. Right away, she recognized them, as if looking at a picture. Still, I could see that in her heart she wanted not to think about it anymore. I was nice to her and said that it was possible I might one day lose my fear of them and be able to live just as I had before. In truth, I was less afraid for myself than I was for the safety of the children. Earlier in the day, after my talk with Mrs. Groves about seeing Miss Jessel at the lake, I went back to join the children in the classroom. Being around them always made me feel so much better. No matter what was wrong with me, I could sit down with Flora or Miles, and they would know just what to do to stop my pain. This time it was Flora that I talked with. As soon as she saw me, she said,
"You've been crying."
Although I had done my best to cover up the redness of my eyes and face with makeup, I was happy that she could see my sadness. I felt a little guilty looking into her beautifully innocent face and wondering to myself,
Is there really something bad underneath all of that sweetness? Could this be some cruel joke that nature has played?
I decided to dismiss the question for the moment. It felt wrong for me to doubt Flora's goodness. However, I still had to research our earlier experience at the lake in order to get to the truth. I needed to know if I had been right in thinking that Flora and Miss Jessel had been in contact before today. It had been difficult for me to tell Mrs. Groves about the experience at the lake. It was difficult because my explanation of things made Flora seem like a bad child. There was no doubt in my mind that she had seen the woman and that she was pretending not to have seen her. And it bothered me to see her having to hide it even more when I came close to her. She would begin to sing a song to herself, or she would act like she was more interested in a toy than she really was in order to make me think she had not seen or heard me. But in the end, I felt that I would need to come out and ask her, because it was the right thing to do. It would make me feel better, even if I knew she was lying. I would then know in my heart that I had not given up and that I was doing the right thing. I was still trying to help. I was not running away. However, I needed more information from Mrs. Groves. Although she had told me a lot about the people I had seen and their past, I still felt that she was keeping secrets. I felt the need to get the last bit of knowledge out of her before I could know exactly what to do.
Do you remember when I first came here we had a short talk about Miles?
I asked her one evening.
We had just received the news that he had been dismissed from his school. I asked if he were ever a bad child, and you answered that he occasionally was bad. I, myself, have never once seen him do anything wrong. He's like an angel with me. What kind of things did you see him do in the past? Tell me exactly what you know. Well,
Mrs. Groves began, obviously uncomfortable with what she had to say.
There was a time when Master Miles spent all of his time with Quint. I was so upset by this that I even went to Miss Jessel and complained about it. She told me, very rudely, to mind my own business. I was very surprised to hear her say this. I, however, could not mind my own business. I then spoke directly with Miles and asked him to remember his family's level in society. I said that he should not spend his time with people of so low a class and education. So you told him that Quint was the wrong person for him to be friends with?
I asked.
Exactly. and it troubled me what the boy did after that. He went and told Quint what you had said.
I interrupted, trying to guess at what had happened.
No, nothing like that. I don't think he ever mentioned our conversation to that man. No. What troubled me so much was the way that the boy would not admit he had been with Quint. And you should have heard his answer to me. What do you mean? I mean that he lied to my face. I knew for a fact that he had been alone with Quint several times and for several hours each time. It was almost like Quint had become his teacher instead of Miss Jessel. When I asked Miles about this, he looked me right in the eyes and said that he had never spent such time with the man. My goodness! How could he just lie to you like that? It was obvious that you had seen them together. Well,
Mrs. Gross said, meaning to suggest that it was forgivable.
Miss Jessel allowed it to happen. I think she might have even encouraged it. She's really the one to blame, not Miles. Did he suggest that it was Miss Jessel's idea?
I asked.
No, of course not. He didn't ever talk about her relationship with Quint? He just lied all the time. He acted like he knew nothing about it. You mean that you were certain that he knew about their relationship?
I yelled, getting suddenly very angry.
No, I didn't. I promise I didn't. Now I think that you're the one who's lying. You're still not telling me what you really know. Drop this need to be proper and polite with me, and just tell me the truth. Tell me everything. Something about Miles made you think that he knew something about Quint and Miss Jessel's relationship. She
began weakly.
He could not, in his young innocence, hide that he knew something. My God! Just think of the terrible influence those two horrible people had on that boy. I'm afraid to think of the things he knew about them. It's not proper at all. It's disgusting. Just think of the kind of person he must be now. Let's not say anything too mean about the boy. I see now why you seemed so unusual when I mentioned his dismissal from school. I'm sure you looked much more unusual than I did. Anyway, how can you think that he was such a bad child when he's been nothing but good since you've known him? Exactly. What had he done at school? We don't know,
I replied.
Tell me exactly what Miles said to you when you approached him about Quint. When you described Quint as a low, uneducated man, did the boy say that you were no better than he? Yes, he did. And did this anger you and make you care less about him? It did anger me, but I forgave him. He's only a little boy after all. Yes, of course. Anyway, he was with that man. And Flora was with Miss Jessel. Everyone seemed to be happy.
I could not be sure about anything yet, but everything I was learning about the children's relationships with Quint and their former teacher seemed to point to something quite ugly.
Although I expected to hear about much worse behavior than just lying, I do still feel the need to watch Miles a little more closely now.
I could see in Mrs. Gross's face that she felt pity for Miles. She pitied him even more now because I doubted his goodness.
Please, don't blame him. I only blame him for keeping secrets. Until I know more about what's going on, I won't blame him any further. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Chapter 10. My doubts and worries weakened over the next few days. I spent time with the children as usual and found them as charming as always. There was no reappearance of Quint or Miss Jessel to keep my doubts strong. The thing I worried the most about now was that the children might become aware of my change in feelings about them. They had become 1,000 times more interesting to me than before. I felt that it must have been obvious at times, but they did not seem to notice. I became very aware of my own behavior, my movements, my looks, the words I spoke. I wondered at all times if the children could see anything different in me. Even though this troubled me, I still felt wonderful around them. Their magical ability to make me happy had not lessened at all. They treated me very well. At the time, their kindness toward me seemed too natural for me to think they might have some other purpose. After all, most children who are given a lot of love and attention will behave in the same way. They would tell me wonderful little stories and play silly games with me. They dressed up like baby animals and acted out the funniest parts of the books they were reading. They greatly improved in their studies. Miles especially seemed to make progress. In fact, he did so well that I began to think that finding another school for him was less important. If I had given it a little more thought, it might have seemed to me that there was something unnatural about his knowledge. It seemed that someone or something extraordinary was helping him to learn so well. All the time, I kept trying to guess why he might have been dismissed from his school. I could find nothing to explain it. Both children had excellent ears for music. I could sing any song I knew, and they would be able to sing it back to me after hearing it only once. Often we would perform parts of plays, or we would turn a lesson into a play, in order to help the children remember it better. The children seemed to enjoy this, especially Miles. Little Flora absolutely loved her elder brother. She would follow his every action and then try to do it herself. They loved one another very much. I never saw them argue or fight. They treated one another with respect. Seeing this made me so happy. I, however, was not so blinded with happiness not to notice that they had had little secret ways of fooling me. One of them would get all of my attention, and then the other would disappear for a short time. They did not do this very often, so I did not let it bother me very much. Later on, however, it became a regular practice of theirs. Reading what I have written so far, I can see that I have been purposefully delaying my story. I have reached the very middle. Now the time has come to tell about the truly terrible days I spent at that house. By continuing, I am forcing myself to painfully relive those fears and emotions I felt then. The only thing left to do is to finish it and be done with it. I remembered reading in bed one evening. The only light in the room came from the 2 candles I had burning next to my bed. I had taken a book from the library. It was Fielding's Amelia. It was not a book that I normally would have wanted to read, but libraries can awaken people's interests that they never knew they had. I remembered enjoying the story quite a lot, when suddenly I felt something was wrong. I lifted my eyes up from the book and looked about the room. Everything seemed in order. A wind blew through the window and caused the curtain to move a little. Flora was fast asleep in her bed next to mine. My eyes finally rested upon the door. I had the feeling that something or someone was in the house. I immediately jumped up from my bed, set the book down on the nightstand, and, taking a candle with me, went out into the hallway. Thinking of Flora, I made sure to lock the door to my room when I left. My candle did not create much light for me to see in the darkness of the hallway. I walked on toward the main entrance to the house. When I finally reached the staircase and prepared to walk down, I noticed a few things. My candle suddenly went out, and from the window I could see the earliest light of morning. Not exactly sunlight, but a dark blue glow. Then I saw someone standing on the stairs below me. It was Peter Quint. He had apparently stopped on his way toward the second floor and was now staring at me. He looked at me in the same way he had from the tower. I stared back at him. He was very much alive to me at that moment, and very much a threat. And yet, surprisingly, I did not feel frightened. We continued to stare at one another for a very long time. If he had been a killer or thief, one of us would have said something. But not a word passed between us. I began to wonder whether he were really alive. He looked so real at that moment. Then I began to wonder whether or not I was still alive. Quint then turned around and slowly began to walk back down the staircase. As he walked, he gradually disappeared into the dark blue light of the early morning. Chapter 11. I stayed on the stairway until I felt pretty certain he would not return. When I came back to my room, the first thing I did was check to make sure that Flora was still sleeping. The one remaining candle that I had left in the bedroom had gone out. The room was very dark now. I walked over to her bed and held the candle above it. She was not there. Suddenly, all the fear that I had not felt earlier came into me. I lifted the blankets to see if she might be hiding there, but found nothing. Then I noticed that the curtains were blowing much harder than before. I walked over to them, and my foot accidentally hit something. The bottom of the curtains began to move upward, and then little Flora appeared from behind. Standing there in the candlelight, she looked to me like an angel, but she seemed to be upset. A strong feeling that I had lost a little bit of her love came over me very suddenly.
"Bad woman,"
she said.
"Where did you go?"
I did not bother to question her about her own behavior, but did my best to make up a suitable explanation for her. I then fell back into a chair that sat next to my bed. I felt extremely calm now that I knew Flora was safe. It seemed that she had woken up while I was away and noticed that my bed was empty. She had been trying to find me afterward. Flora ran over to me and sat on my legs. Her face in the candlelight looked sleepy. I laid my head back against the chair and shut my eyes for a moment.
"Did you go to the window to see if I was outside walking about?"
I asked.
"It seemed like there was a person out there, so I went to look,"
she answered.
"And was there anyone there?"
My eyes were once again open. She had my full attention now.
No, there wasn't,"
she answered, almost in a singing voice. It seemed that she had expected me to ask her this question. I knew that she was not telling me the truth. I wanted very much to tell her I knew she was lying. I wanted to question her and get the truth from her. I wanted to say,
"We both know that something is happening here. Stop playing this game with me and let's be honest with each other. Then we can at least understand each other and live with the truth."
However, I did not say this. I fought against it. Now, looking back, I wished that I had said it instead of doing what I did next. I stood up suddenly and looked at her bed.
"Flora, when I came back to the room, I did not notice that you were out of your bed until I came much closer. It's because I saw that you had pulled the curtain over a part of the bed. Did you want me to believe that you were still sleeping there?"
She did not answer right away. She stood there before me, thinking for a moment.
I did not want to make you frightened,
the clever little girl said.
If you saw that I was gone, why would you have felt the need to? I knew you'd return. And look, here you are.
She did not seem to think that there was anything strange about her behavior. In fact, she had become quite bored with our conversation. Immediately, she climbed back into bed and fell asleep. I, however, could not sleep. It was clear to me now just how important it was that I had returned. From that night, I made sure to watch the children and the house more closely. Once I felt that Flora was asleep, I would get up and search the home. In all the times I searched, Quint never once reappeared on the stairway. I did, however, have a different experience one night. After having searched the entire second floor of the house, I went to the stairway in order to go to the floor below and have a look around. As I began to walk down, I saw a woman sitting at the bottom of the staircase. We did not face each other, but I could see that she was upset. I stood watching her for about 20 seconds, and then she disappeared before me. I did not have to see her face to know that it was Miss Jessel. In fact, I am glad that I did not meet her on my way back upstairs, because her appearance frightened me more than Quint's. Her face, although very beautiful, was so white and evil-looking. After almost 2 weeks of spending my nights this way, searching the house, I remembered beginning to feel the need for more sleep. One evening, after I'd finished looking around, I decided to go to bed. I fell asleep right away. For 3 hours I slept very well. Then I woke up very suddenly and found that the candle I had left lighted between mine and Flora's beds had recently been blown out. Smoke was still rising from it. I knew almost right away that Flora had put it out. I got out of bed and walked over to hers. She was not there. I then lit a match and walked over to the window. She was standing there looking outside. She would have no excuses to give this time. She had blown out my candle and, again, covered her bed with the curtain in order to cheat me. And I knew, by the way she did not notice me, or the light of my match, that she could see something outside now. Her attention was completely given to whatever or whomever stood beyond the window. I even had time to put on my gown and shoes. She did not once move as I approached the window behind her. I could see that she was looking down into the horrible face of the woman we had seen at the lake. I decided to let this continue and, meanwhile, looked for another window that I could look out of and watch them both. Having managed to open the bedroom door without Flora noticing, I walked into the hallway. I tried thinking which window had the best view of the lawn, and then remembered that Miles' room stood directly above the spot where I had seen the woman standing. But what if Miles were to awaken? He would know exactly what I was doing. I walked up to his door and listened for a while. It was possible that he might be awake as well, looking out of his window. Putting my ear to the door, the room sounded very quiet. I decided that I could not enter. He might not be doing anything wrong. And it was Flora that I was presently dealing with, not him. But where else could I go? An idea then came to me. There was a very large master bedroom down the hallway. Its position in the house was just in front of and below the tower Quint had stood watching me from. It was much too big to use as an actual bedroom, so for many years it had remained empty. When I say empty, I mean empty of people, for it was full of beautiful old furniture. I entered the room very quietly and then walked over to one of the windows. Once I managed to move away the curtain and open the window, I saw another person on the lawn. He was looking up in my direction, and for a moment I feared that I had been seen. However, I found that it was not me that the person was looking at. He was looking at a higher part of the house. He was looking at the tower. There was someone in the tower. All this time that I spent looking out at the figure, I felt ill with surprise and terror, for the figure down below was not whom I had expected to see. The person standing outside was Miles. Chapter 12. I managed to control myself the following morning. I watched the children more closely than ever before now. I did not let one of them out of my sight, which gave me little opportunity to speak with Mrs. Groves alone. I did not want to let the children know about my worries, so I waited until the afternoon to mention anything to Mrs. Groves. I depended on her. It was a very lucky thing that she had been there and had believed me, for without her support, I might have lost my mind. Mrs. Groves's thinking, however, was different from mine. She did not doubt the truth of what I told her, but she had never actually seen those horrible people walking about the house. And because she could see no obvious change in the children's behavior, she did not worry about them as much as I did. In fact, she worried much more about me, for she could see that I was upset and getting less sleep than usual. She and I met on the main balcony above the house. Each of us sitting in a chair overlooking the great lawn below, we appeared to be having a simple chat. The children, meanwhile, played on the lawn, where we could easily watch them. Mrs. Groves's eyes followed their movements below without any sign of worry. Then she turned to listen to what I had to tell her. The look on her face told me that she was simply doing me a favor by patiently listening. I shared with her the events of the night before. After finding Miles last night standing outside, I went downstairs and out the front door to bring him back in. He came running to me as soon as he saw me. During the time I walked him back to his bedroom, neither of us said a word. I kept wondering how he might attempt to explain himself. Would he still try and make up a silly lie, even though the truth was so clear? I wondered if he would still try to act like a perfectly well-behaved child in front of me. I tried to guess how our relationship might change after this night. The look on his face seemed to show embarrassment, but there was also something else there. He seemed pleased. When we entered his room, I could see that his bed was completely untouched. The moonlight was so bright that we had no trouble seeing one another. I sat down on the edge of his bed, and then felt I had no choice but to directly talk with him about what had happened.
Miles, I need for you to be honest with me. Why were you outside just now?
He smiled, and his teeth glowed white in the moonlight. Could you possibly understand if I told you? I did not know how to answer this. I was too worried about whether he would be open with me or not. I simply moved my head forward to say that I would understand. I felt so helpless sitting there before him. He had so much power over me. I could not suggest anything about Quint or anyone else without making myself look crazy. Oh, how I prayed that he would tell me the truth. I went outside so that you might think I was a bad child. I know how good you always seem to think I am. He said this very happily and innocently. I could do nothing but take him into my arms and fight desperately against the tears that wanted so badly to flow from my eyes.
I can see that you did not even bother to put on your sleeping clothes,
I said. No, I sat in my room and read a book until midnight. Then I went downstairs.
That's very cute,
I replied, still putting on a pleasant face.
But what made you think that I would know you were outside?
I had arranged for Flora to wake you by putting out your candle and then going to her window. I felt like a complete fool. I had let myself be so easily cheated. I, of course, could not mention that I had seen Miss Jessel, for he could just as easily accuse me of being mad. I had no choice but to pretend to accept his story. I could do nothing else.
You're just lucky you didn't catch a cold,
I said, trying my best to make a joke. He welcomed my joke with a bigger smile and said, "You see, I can be very bad, can't I?" Chapter 13. Mrs. Groves did not seem very impressed with my story. I then added one other comment that Miles had made just before I left his room.
He said to me, "If I can do this, imagine what other bad things I could do." Even though he was joking around with me, I could not help thinking that those other bad things might be the things that got him dismissed from his school.
My goodness, listen to what you're saying,
said the housekeeper.
I only speak the truth, Mrs. Groves. If you had been up last night with me, you could have seen it all yourself. There's no question that the children see these people quite often. Just think about how neither child ever mentions Peter Quint or Miss Jessel. These people were a part of their past. Why should their names never once be said aloud? It doesn't make sense, unless they're hiding something from us. Look at them down there. They act as though they are reading a story to each other, but the truth is that they're discussing the dead friends who come each night to pay them a visit. I realize that my talk sounds terribly mad, but I'm quite the opposite, actually. I'm clearer about things now than I've ever been before.
Although she must have thought my words were terrible, her concern for the children kept her listening.
What exactly are you more clear about?
She asked.
I'm clearer about the children, about why they seem so perfect, sweet, and beautiful. At first, I fell in love with them, but now I realize that it's all a lie. You think the children are cheating us? I know it sounds crazy, but yes, I think they are.
As I spoke these words, I felt that I understood things even more clearly.
They've been so sweet to us because we are like strangers to them. They do not belong to you or me. They belong to them, to Quint and the horrible woman. What are you saying? I'm saying what I said before. They want the children.
Mrs. Groves looked down toward where the children were playing.
But why? They want to finish the evil they started when they lived and worked here. My goodness!
Mrs. Groves cried softly. I could see now that bad memories of Quint and Miss Jessel were coming back to her. And it seemed like she doubted my words less, for she said,
Oh, those two people were truly terrible. But I don't see how they could harm the children now. You don't see?
I shouted a little too loudly. The children suddenly stopped their playing for a moment and turned their heads up toward us.
Haven't they been hurting them all this time?
I said more quietly. The children, meanwhile, lost their interest in us and returned to their storytelling.
They could take their lives.
Mrs. Groves looked at me suddenly with wide eyes, but said nothing.
Think about it,
I continued.
So far, they have only been able to approach the children from far away. They call them from outside the children's windows, from the opposite side of the lake, but it's obvious that they want to get closer and closer. That's why I found Quint walking up the stairway that night. He was coming for miles. It seems that something prevents them from coming directly to the children. Therefore, they are trying to get the children to come to them. And it's only a matter of time before they succeed. And what happens then? They'll die, so we must do everything we can to protect them. Why don't we call their uncle and have them move to another house? Why do you think he'll agree to that? What do you think he'll think if he receives a letter from me saying that Miles and Flora are crazy? But they might be. He made it clear to me in my interview that I was to deal with all the problems with the children myself. He clearly does not want to be bothered.
Mrs. Groves took hold of my hand and looked me in the eyes.
Write to him anyway. He should help us.
I suddenly rose from my chair.
Do you think I could really do that?
I asked. It was clear from her face that she did not think I could. She understood my fear of disappointing him, of being considered a failure. However, she did not realize just how strong this feeling really was inside of me. And it was with great fear and surprise that she heard me say,
I warn you now. I will leave this house immediately if I ever find out that you have written to him yourself. I promise you that.
Chapter 14. Of course, I continued to spend a great deal of time with the children. However, it was more difficult to talk with them now. For a month, I felt our conversations becoming more and more uncomfortable. I knew then, just as I know today, that the children understood my troubles. There was, however, an unspoken agreement between us. We never once spoke about Quint or Miss Jessel, but our conversation became like a game. No matter what we talked about or what we studied, every subject seemed dangerously close to the subject we did not want to discuss. One topic we absolutely avoided discussing was death, and whether people can come back from death. In the end, the safest subjects seemed to be things about my life before, when I lived with my family. They learned everything about my past. They knew the names of all my relatives, even the names of my dog and cat. Every lesson I got the feeling that the children expected me to break down and directly ask them about their visitors. It seemed that they were prepared for this. For quite a while things continued this way, and for a long time I did not see Quint or Miss Jessel. However, this did not help me to feel better. Summer passed and autumn came, and yet I could still feel that they were there, hiding somewhere. In fact, I became more sensitive to their presence. I had said to Mrs. Groves before that I would have been willing to put my life in danger in order to protect the children. I had hoped that by seeing the ghosts myself, I was preventing the children from seeing them. However, the situation was now quite the opposite. I knew that the children were still being visited. In fact, there were times during our lessons when I felt that the visitors, although I could not see them, were in the room with us. At these moments, I wanted more than anything to shout at the children.
Don't lie to me anymore. I know they are here with us now.
But I could see that this would have been useless. The children would have only had to pretend that they did not understand what I was talking about, in order for me to have looked absolutely crazy. Every day I could feel their power and my weakness. Sometimes this feeling bothered me so much that I would have to lock myself in a room away from them and practice how I might one day talk directly with them about their behavior. In the end, however, I would always fall into the chair, realizing that such directness would not be proper. I felt ashamed of myself. I would then return to the children and continue to talk about myself as they asked me to do. Sometimes, when I stopped talking, I could tell that the ghosts were present, and that the children were listening to them and not to me. What bothered me the most was that I did not know exactly what the children were seeing and hearing. One other subject that helped to ease our discomfort was whether or not their uncle, the man who hired me, would ever come to live with us. Shouldn't we send him a letter? They would ask. I allowed them to write to him, but I never sent the letters out. First of all, I knew their uncle would not want to receive them. Secondly, they were too wonderful to be sent. I still have them today. Looking back, I do not believe that they truly missed their uncle. Rather, I believe that somehow, and I do not know how, they knew the special feelings I had for him. It was a cruel joke. I'm still surprised that I did not begin to dislike the children for this. It is possible that I might have grown tired of them if the situation had not suddenly changed. Chapter 15. One beautiful sunny Sunday morning, Miles, Flora, Mrs. Groves, and I myself walked to church. It was the first nice day we had had in quite a while. The children seemed happy, but I could not understand how they never became tired of being with me. We were always together, and sometimes I felt like I was more a prison guard than a teacher. Always I watched their behavior to see if they might do something bad, and I wondered how I might deal with them when they did become bad. It was just at this moment that Miles suddenly turned to me and asked, "Do you have any idea when I might return to school?" He asked this quite sweetly, with the voice of an angel. Most people would have felt this was a simple question. I, however, did not. I immediately stopped walking and looked at him. He had caught me. I did not know how to answer. After all, it would be good for me to be around with men at times. Here, I'm always surrounded by women. I knew that I had to be careful with what I said. For a moment, I pretended to laugh. "You are always around me." He did not return my laugh, but looked at me with his sweet smile. "Don't misunderstand, you are wonderful, but I need other people to talk with. I feel that it's time for me to move on."
True. You have been learning things quite quickly.
"And you must admit I've behaved very well." I walked over to him, and putting my hand gently on his head, said,
I'm sorry, but I can't agree with you there.
"Oh, but it was only one evening that you found me being bad."
One night, you say?
"Yes, the evening I went outside onto the lawn."
Yes, right. Remind me why you did that.
"You can't remember?" he said with that angel smile. "I did it to prove that I could be bad."
Oh, that's right.
"And don't you think I could do other bad things?" I managed to stay calm and said,
Of course you could, but I don't think you will.
"I certainly won't do the same thing,"
I'm glad to hear that.
I replied.
Now let's continue on our way to church.
We began to walk again, arm in arm. After only a few moments, he asked, "You still haven't answered my question. When can I return to the school?"
Did you like your school?
He thought for a moment. "Yes, I'm easy to be happy."
If that's true, then you won't mind staying here.
"I am happy here, but I feel that I could learn more at school. I don't mean that you don't have more to teach me, but I feel that I need to experience more of the outside world." When the church came into view, I began to walk faster, hoping to avoid going any further with this conversation. Some of the workers from our home were there as well. They had gathered at the door and were watching us as we approached. With every step we took, I hoped that Miles would not speak again of his school. I looked forward to the time when I could listen to the priest and not think any more about the children. We were almost at the door. I felt it was safe now. Then he suddenly turned around and said, "I want to be around with people who are like me."
Not many boys are like you, Miles.
I said, trying my best to smile and laugh.
The only child I know similar to you is your sister Flora.
"You mean I'm like a little girl?" I realized then that I had said the wrong thing.
But you care for your sister very much.
Of course, that's why He did not finish his sentence. Taking his hand in mine, we walked on toward the door of the church. As we were about to enter, he suddenly stopped again. We were now the only people standing outside. Everyone else had gone in to begin service. On either side of us stood hundreds of tombs. He looked at me for a short time without speaking.
What were you saying before?
I asked. I think you know what I was going to say. He then added something that so surprised me I had to sit down. Tell me, do you and my uncle share the same ideas about me?
Are you sure that you know my ideas?
No, you haven't shared them with me. How can I know them? I'm wondering if he knows.
Knows what exactly?
If he knows about my situation now. I did not know how to answer this without making his uncle look bad. But thinking about the situation he had put us all in, I decided to speak honestly about him.
I'm pretty sure that he doesn't think much about you.
Miles stood silently among the tombs for a moment. Can't we force him to care? If he comes, he'll care.
Yes, but how can we get him to come?
Don't worry about that. I'll think of a way, he said, smiling happily. Then he walked in through the church door. Chapter 16. I did not go into the church after Miles. I remained sitting among the tombs, thinking about what the young boy had said. I knew that not attending the church service would look bad, but I did not want to go in late and disturb the rest of the people inside. What bothered me most was the fact that Miles now knew that I was afraid of finding out the truth about why he was dismissed from the school. Looking back, I feel now that I should have contacted the uncle. However, at the time, the idea of dealing with such unpleasant things made me avoid the problem. Again, Miles had power over me. What he had said to me in our short conversation at the church was, "Contact my uncle, or I will stop being such a nice young man." It bothered me that a boy of this age could be so clever and powerful. I realized then, as I walked around the church, that I was now much more helpless than before. There was nothing I could do to make the situation better. It was because of this that I did not go into the church. I could not possibly sit next to that boy who knew how helpless I was. Stopping near one of the church windows, I could hear the sounds of music and prayer. Suddenly, the desire to run away came over me. This was my opportunity. Because of the church service, no one would be at the house. I could very easily run back, pack my clothing, and catch the afternoon train back to town. I could imagine everyone coming back from church and wondering where I had gone. I could see the children pretending that they had no idea where I was or why I had gone. For a moment, I considered only getting away until dinner time. But then the idea of having to explain to everyone, especially the children, why I had wandered off, seemed very unpleasant. Immediately I left the church and walked back across the great lawn to the house. When I arrived, the chance to escape seemed even greater. If I were to leave now, I could avoid the arguments and angry words that would surely come my way if people had been at home. The only problem was how to get away. I would need a car to take me to the station, but that would take time. It was possible that people might return before the car could get here. I suddenly felt helpless and sat down at the bottom of the stairway. I put my head in my hands and was about to cry, when I then realized that I looked exactly like the ghost I had seen that night, crying on the stairway. Immediately, I got back to my feet and walked up the stairs. I went to the children's classroom to gather a few things to take with me back to town. However, when I opened the door, I saw someone sitting at my desk. At first, I thought she could have been a servant who had taken an opportunity to rest while everyone was away at church. Her face was turned away from me, but I could see from the way she sat holding her head in her hands that she was very sad. She then suddenly turned and rose to her feet. As we stood less than 10 feet away from each other, staring into one another's eyes, I could see very clearly that the woman before me was the children's former teacher. She had on the same black dress she had worn at the lake, and her horrible white face seemed to challenge my right to be there. I shouted at her,
"Go away from here, you evil woman!"
The sound of my voice echoed throughout the house. The look on her face seemed to show that she understood what I had said. She then disappeared, leaving me with a feeling that I could not go away. Chapter 17. I was surprised and disappointed to see, when everyone returned, that I had not been missed. No one made any jokes about my disappearance. In fact, no one said anything at all about it. I guessed that the children had asked Mrs. Groves not to mention anything to me. As tea time approached, I managed to meet with her alone in the servants' room. I can still remember the way I found her quietly sitting and looking into the fire in the fireplace.
"Actually, the children did tell me not to say anything to you,"
said Mrs. Groves.
"Where did you go?" "I took a walk and then returned to the house to meet someone." "But who could you possibly know round here?" "I know a few people,"
I said, laughing.
"Tell me, did the children mention why they didn't want you to say anything to me?" "They told me that it would make you uncomfortable if I said anything. Is this true? Would you have been uncomfortable?"
No, I would have preferred you to say something. Why did they think I would be uncomfortable?
"I don't know. Miles simply said that we should only do things that please you." "Ha! If only he would please me. Did Flora say anything?" "She only agreed with Miles." "Well, that was nice of all of you to think about me,"
I said, feeling the opposite.
"There are no more secrets between Miles and me. We had a conversation outside of the church." "What do you mean, no secrets?" "I mean, we know everything about one another. By the way, the person I came back to meet was Miss Jessel." "She actually spoke to you?"
she asked in disbelief.
"Yes. She was sitting at my desk in the classroom." "Tell me what she said." "She said that she is very sad. She feels the sadness of the dead." "Of the dead?" "Of the wandering dead. She desires Flora's company. But now I don't care anymore. I've decided." "You've decided what?" "I've decided what to do." "And that is?" "I've decided to write to their uncle." "That's a wonderful idea,"
Mrs. Groves cried.
"I understand now that I have no choice. Miles feels that I fear to write to his uncle. I, however, will prove him wrong. We'll bring him here and we'll discuss together with Miles why he has not gone back to school yet. He'll see that I'm not to blame. He'll understand the main reason."
Mrs. Groves, being a very simple woman, did not know the reason I was talking about.
"I'm sorry, dear. I guess I'm not clear about the reason either." "His dismissal from school." "You plan to have their uncle read the letter?" "I should have sent it to him as soon as we received it." "Oh, but you shouldn't,"
argued Mrs. Groves.
"We still don't know why he was dismissed." "Well, what could have been the reason? Was it because Miles is not clever? Was it because Miles is ill? Was it because he has bad manners? Of course not. It must have been for something terrible, something evil. And do you know whom I blame? I blame their uncle. He was irresponsible when he left those two terrible people in charge of the house and the children. I feel then that I am to blame, because I did not say anything to their uncle when I knew something was wrong. I'm sure you won't be blamed. It's not myself that I'm worried about. It's the children.
I sat quietly for a moment and then asked,
What should I say in my letter? Let me write to him.
I knew that Mrs. Groves could not read or write, so I asked,
How? I'll get someone in town to help me. You want other people in town to know our business?
Her eyes began to water as she thought about my question more and more.
All right. It's impossible, I know. I guess you should write then. I'll start the letter this evening.
Chapter 18. That evening, as I lay in bed with an empty white sheet of paper before me, I tried to begin the letter. Outside, a storm was throwing rain heavily against the house. After a while, without having written a word, I got up from the bed and went out into the hallway. I stopped at Miles' door and put my ear against it to see what I could hear. I listened for any sign that he might be awake. Although I guessed he would not be sleeping, I did not expect what then happened. His voice came to me through the door. Please, come inside. I opened the door and found Miles sitting up in bed. He was smiling at me. What are you doing up at this late hour? He asked. I thought to myself that if Mrs. Groves had been there, she would have felt that there was no problem between Miles and me.
What made you guess that I was standing outside of your door?
I asked. I could hear you. You thought you were being quiet, but really you sounded like an army of men walking down the hall.
So, you've been awake this whole time?
Yes, I usually stay up late and think for a while. I set the candle down at the table next to his bed, and sitting myself on the corner of the bed, asked,
What kind of things do you think about?
Of course, I think of you.
I appreciate your thoughts, but I'd much prefer that you get better sleep.
But I also think about this trouble between us. I took his hand into mine and found that it felt very cold.
What trouble between us?
Oh, you know, troubles about my school and everything.
Everything?
I said. Yes, the things we talked about before. I did not answer right away, although I felt that the longer I was silent, the more he would feel that I recognized the problem that he had mentioned.
Of course, you will return to school. However, we need to find a better school for you. The one you went to before was not good enough. You never mentioned anything about your school before, so I could not know that it made you so upset.
At that moment, the boy's face looked more like an angel than ever before, and the feeling came over me that I had to do whatever I could to save him.
Why did you never talk about your school before?
He sat silent for a moment and then said, I never did? Both his voice and his face seemed to show that he really was surprised to hear this. I could not tell if he was truly trying to remember or if he was trying to think of a lie to explain his behavior.
Since I met you, you never once said anything about it. I don't know any of the names of your teachers or friends there. I never heard any stories about the place. I know nothing. Up until this morning, I had thought you were happy with the situation here.
Just then, I saw his face turn a little red. With a slow turn of his head, he said, I'm not happy. I need to leave.
You don't like this house?
Yes, I do.
What is wrong then?
I am a young boy, and you know how young boys are. You know what they need. Of course, I did not know exactly what young boys needed.
So you want to live with your uncle?
It's not that simple. You can't just send me away to him and just continue your work here.
What do you mean?
I mean that you have done something wrong, and you can't expect not to be punished.
Punished? I realize I've made mistakes, but I don't think punishment is necessary.
But you must tell my uncle exactly what you have done. You must tell him you kept me here instead of sending me back to school. You must write him and ask him to come so that everything can be made clear.
And don't you think he will have many questions for you, Miles? Isn't there a lot for you to tell him about yourself? And don't you think the result will be sending you away from here?
But that is what I want. I want to be sent away from here. What kinds of things do you think I have to tell him about?
You should tell him things that you won't tell me. You can't return to your school.
Good. I have no desire to return there. I want to go to a different school. He said this very happily. It made me feel more sorry for him than ever before, and I immediately took him into my arms, saying,
"Oh, poor boy. You poor boy."
He smiled as I kissed him, and seemed to be waiting for me to say something else. So, dear woman?
Don't you want to tell me anything?
I asked. He looked away from me and held up his hand to examine for a moment. There is nothing more to say. I said it all today at the church.
So you want me to stop looking after you so closely?
He turned back toward me and very softly said, I want you to leave me alone. I let go of his hand and rose to my feet. I remained standing next to his bed, for I feared that leaving him now would mean losing him forever.
I've started to write to your uncle,
I said. Go complete your writing then.
Miles,
I said gently.
Tell me what you did at school.
His eyes met mine and he repeated, What I did? For a moment, I felt that he was surely innocent, and that I now had an opportunity to help him. I acted immediately.
My poor Miles, poor Miles. You must understand that I'm very worried about you. You need help. It might seem often like I'm spending too much time with you and watching over you too closely, but I must do this. I don't mean to upset or bother you. I'm just trying to help.
I then decided to take a chance and go further.
And now, I need you to help me help you.
Then I realized I made a mistake and said too much. Suddenly, a huge cold wind blew through the room, and I could hear Miles scream very loudly. I could not tell whether his scream was from pleasure or fear. I quickly stood up and, looking about the room, saw that the windows were closed. The room was completely dark now.
Miles, the candle has been blown out.
Yes, I know. I put it out myself, the boy answered. Chapter 19. The following morning, after I had finished class with the children, Mrs. Groves asked me if I had written the letter. I answered that I had, but I did not tell her that I had not yet sent it out. I did not feel there was any great hurry that morning, so I kept it in my pocket to give to the mailman whenever I saw him. The children behaved extremely well that morning. They did their math exercises very easily and much faster than I could have done them. I felt that Miles' good behavior was a way for him to prove to me that he did not plan to help himself, as I had asked him to. There was no sign of worry or sadness in the boy. It was as if nothing had happened the night before. It was amazing how pure and sweet he really seemed. It made the mystery of his dismissal from school that much greater. Even if truly terrible spirits were influencing the boy, it was hard for me to imagine him ever doing anything truly evil. He was even sweeter later on, when after dinner he offered to play piano for me. While he played, I could not help feeling that his purpose was to say, "You see, I never really intended to go away to another school. I was just trying to make a point to you about how I wanted to be left alone a little more." His playing was excellent, and I listened very carefully as I sat next to the fireplace. After half an hour had passed, I suddenly woke up from the dream his playing had put me in, and realized that Flora had not been with us the whole time. I sat up straight and asked Miles if he knew where she was. He did not answer right away, but waited until he had finished the song he was playing. "I have no idea." A large smile then opened up on his face, and he immediately began another song. I ran upstairs to see if Flora was in our bedroom. She was not. I searched every room on the second floor, but found her nowhere. I guessed then that she was with Mrs. Gross. However, when I found the housekeeper, she was alone. She herself had thought that I had taken both children with me after dinner. It was natural for her to think this, because up until now, I had never left the children alone. There was still the possibility that Flora was with one of the other cleaners somewhere in the house. We decided to stay calm and search the home separately. However, when we met up again a little while later, and could see in one another's faces that Flora was still missing, we both began to feel terribly worried.
"She must be upstairs,"
said Mrs. Groves.
"Are you sure you checked every room?" "I'm sure she is not there,"
I answered.
"In fact, I'm sure she is not in the house now." "But surely she would not go outside without wearing anything on her head. You see, she did not take her hat with her. It's still there on the chair." "Wasn't there someone else who never wore a hat?"
I asked.
"Do you mean Miss Jessel? Do you think they are together now?" "Yes, I'm sure they are together. We have to look for them."
Mrs. Groves stood silently. She looked very upset. When I touched her shoulder, she did not show that she felt anything. Then, turning to me, she asked,
"And what about Miles? Do you know where he is?" "I don't doubt that he is in the classroom with Peter Quint,"
I said with a calmness that clearly surprised Mrs. Groves.
"They have cheated me in a very pretty way." "What do you mean pretty?"
Mrs. Groves asked.
"All right, in a terrible way then. And Miles has put himself in this situation."
"So you will just let him be in there with that terrible man?"
"Yes, it doesn't trouble me any more." "Have you changed the way you look at things because you have written to their uncle? Do you feel less responsible?"
asked Mrs. Groves. Feeling around in my pocket, I took out the letter and threw it on the table before us.
"We will have one of the servants take it into town."
I then walked into the entranceway and opened the front door to go out. I turned and saw Mrs. Groves had still not moved. I then continued out the door and down the path away from the house. I heard her shout behind me,
"You should at least wear a hat and a coat." "She's not wearing anything, so why should I?"
I shouted without turning back.
"If you are not coming with me, then I suggest that you look for her some more on the second floor." "Alone?"
Mrs. Groves said with fear in her voice. She then began to follow me down the path. Chapter 20. Together, Mrs. Groves and I walked to the lake. It was not really a lake, but more like a pond. However, I still felt its size was impressive. Occasionally, I would take a boat with the children out on the lake, and we would sometimes have our lessons there. And during my many walks with Flora, I noticed that the lake was one of her favorite places to spend time. Mrs. Groves, however, did not know this about the little girl. She was afraid that I was walking to the lake because I guessed that Flora had drowned.
Do you really believe Flora would get in the water?
She asked me.
It is possible, but I don't think the water is very deep anywhere in the lake. I think it's more possible that she is exactly where I saw Miss Jessel standing before. Do you mean the time that Flora acted like she had not noticed Miss Jessel? Yes, that amazing little actress. I knew that one day she would want to return to this place on her own, and thanks to Miles, today she has had an opportunity. So you really think that the children talk about the ghosts together? I'm sure that if we could hear their conversations, we would both be shocked. So if we find little Flora there...
I waited for Mrs. Groves to finish her thought.
Then I suppose the ghost of Miss Jessel will be there as well. Of course. Anyway, we'll soon find out.
We then continued toward the lake. Mrs. Groves stayed very near me. When we arrived, she let out a loud breath of relaxation, for Flora was nowhere to be seen. My companion pointed to a little forest to the right of the pond, and suggested that we look there. I, however, was sure that Flora was in a boat somewhere out on the lake. Mrs. Groves looked out over the water.
But I don't see anything out there. I believe she has gone to the other side and hidden the boat. You think little Flora could do that on her own? She is not on her own, and when she is with that woman, she is no longer a little girl.
I then looked across the lake for possible hiding places. There were several that I could see, places with lots of trees.
If she has gone over to the other side, where over there has she gone? We must go and see,
I said, beginning to walk again.
You mean we are going to walk around the whole lake? Of course. It's only a 10-minute walk. Flora was in a hurry. That's why she took the boat. We, however, are not in a hurry. Goodness,
she said, beginning to follow me close behind. The way around the lake was not easy. We had to climb over bushes and bend down low to pass under trees. Several times we had to stop for a moment and let Mrs. Groves take a break. Soon, however, we reached the other side and, within a group of small trees, we found the boat. It was tied to one of the tree branches. The boat was so safely hidden that it hardly seemed the work of a child. But by now I was used to strange experiences. We then walked on through the trees until we came to an open field.
I see her,
the two of us shouted. Not far from us, Flora sat on her knees, picking a plant from the ground. She did not come toward us, but seemed to wait for us to go to her. She wore a big smile as we came toward her, but she never spoke a word. I was surprised by my calmness. Mrs. Groves, however, destroyed the silence by falling to her knees and taking the child in her arms with a cry of joy. As Flora was being held, she looked up at me with angry-looking eyes. At that moment, I envied the simple relationship between the children and Mrs. Groves. There was no anger between them, because they both happily pretended nothing was wrong. There was no more pretending between the children and me. When the housekeeper and Flora finally separated, Flora was the first to speak. She looked at both of us and said,
Why aren't you wearing a hat? Why aren't you?
I replied. She accepted my answer and then quickly changed the subject.
And my brother, where is he?
I felt that she was throwing this in my face, so I decided to fight back.
I know where he is, but I won't let you know unless you tell me something. What do you want me to tell you?
Mrs. Groves's eyes grew wide as she waited for me to speak.
Tell me, dear, where has Miss Jessel gone to?
Chapter 21. My relationship with Flora completely changed from this time on. Mrs. Groves had let out a little cry when I had asked Flora my question. I, too, cried out when moments later I saw something across the lake from us.
"It's her! It's her! Over there, across the way!"
I felt both frightened and happy to see Miss Jessel looking at us from the other side of the water. I was happy because now I had proof for Mrs. Gross that I was not crazy. There she was, standing very clearly before us all, including the frightened Mrs. Groves. And strangely enough, I gave that horrible woman a look of thanks that she seemed to recognize. She was standing exactly where Mrs. Groves and I had been before we had walked around the lake. The housekeeper's eyes did not move from the place I pointed to, and her face had turned white in expectation of what she might see. Flora's reaction truly surprised me. Instead of looking in the direction of Miss Jessel, she turned toward me and stared seriously into my eyes. I was frightened by this look she gave me. I did not know she was able to feel such anger. It seemed that she blamed me for her unhappiness, instead of that horrible woman watching us in the distance. Even though I knew she had seen the ghost, I suddenly felt a great need to prove it.
"Look, you poor little girl. Don't pretend that you don't see her. She stands clearly before us all."
The look on the little girl's face grew even more serious, making her seem much older than she really was. While this troubled me a great deal, I also became troubled by the fact that Mrs. Groves seemed upset with me too. The old housekeeper turned her face to me and shouted,
"How horrible you can be! There's nothing over there."
I looked back toward the other side of the lake and saw the woman still standing there. She had been there for more than a minute now. I immediately took hold of Mrs. Groves and turned her body toward the lake, forcing her to look at the woman across from us. I pointed directly at the ghost and shouted,
"There! She is looking directly at you. Her eyes are on you. Don't tell me that you can't see her."
Mrs. Groves looked long and hard at the place I pointed to. When she finally turned to face me, I could tell that she had seen nothing. It was clear that she had many different feelings inside of her at this moment. I could see she was angry with me and surprised at my behavior. Yet she also believed that I believed in what I saw. She pitied me for this. All of my power had now been lost. It was no longer just the children against me. They now had the support of their housekeeper.
Miss Jessel died. We all know it. Flora and I know it. She's not there and she can't be there. This has all been a terrible game, a cruel game. And now it's all over. Come, little Flora, let's quickly go back to the house."
Flora looked at me with the same cold eyes, and then, taking hold of the housekeeper's dress, said,
"Why are you so terrible to me? There's no one there, and there never has been anyone. I hate you."
At this moment, she suddenly lost all of her beauty and purity. She looked terrible now. Putting her arms around Mrs. Groves, she cried,
"Let's leave her. I want to leave her."
The two then turned away from me and began to walk back toward the house. Mrs. Groves looked back at me several times with frightened eyes. Meanwhile, Miss Jessel continued to stare at me from across the lake. She had not been there to prove that I was not crazy. She had been there to destroy me. I knew then that the words spoken by that pitiful child were not her own. They were the words of Miss Jessel.
"You are now gone from me, Flora,"
I shouted to them as they continued to leave me.
"Their control over you is too strong, and it seems you prefer them to me. I have tried very hard to help you, but I failed. Goodbye, Flora."
I cannot remember what exactly happened after that. I just recall having the smell of wet grass in my nose. I guessed from this that I had fallen to the ground and cried crazily with my face in the grass. I got back on my feet, wiped the dirt away from my clothes, and began the long, hard walk back to the house. I could not cross the lake because Flora and the housekeeper had taken the boat. I was forced to walk through the darkness of early evening. When I finally managed to return to the house, I went straight to my room. There, I found that Flora's bed and clothing had been taken away and moved to Mrs. Gross's room. I did not see them for the rest of the night. However, much to my surprise, I did see Miles quite a lot. This night proved to be a very important one. Although the day had been terrible in every way, at the end of it, I felt a strange kind of sad comfort. I had decided not to bother Miles any more. He wanted to be free, so I decided to let him have his freedom. I changed my clothing, and then went to the classroom to sit quietly next to the fireplace and enjoy a warm cup of tea. I was surprised when, at around 8 in the evening, he entered the classroom and sat down near me in front of the fire. Neither one of us said one word the whole time. Even though the fire was going strong, I felt nothing but coldness around me. Chapter 22. Very early the next morning, before the sun had even risen, I found Mrs. Groves standing next to my bed. She told me that Flora was terribly ill. She had not slept the whole night, and her head was very hot. It seemed she had been afraid of something. I felt a pain deep down in my stomach, for I knew that her fear was not of ghosts, but of me. I jumped out of the bed immediately and began to ask Mrs. Groves many questions.
Does she still say that she did not see anything? That's not something I am comfortable talking with her about. And I don't feel the need to ask her either, because she has been so clearly upset about yesterday. I think I know what she did and did not see. She is not herself now. That horrible Miss Jessel! I should have known her purpose in appearing before us like that. It's my own fault. I made a huge mistake yesterday, and now I know that Flora will never want to see me again.
Mrs. Groves did not reply right away. She seemed to be thinking of what to say.
I'm afraid that you are right. She does not want to see you, and I've never seen her feel so strongly about anything before. And is it this strong feeling that is making her so ill now? Oh, yes. She's always worried that you might come and pay her a visit. Every little noise in the hallway upsets her. Has she said anything at all about Miss Jessel? Nothing at all. She made it clear to me yesterday that there was no one else at the lake except the 3 of us. Very clear. Ha! Well, I suppose that you must believe her, because you could not see it yourself. Of course. I have no choice but to believe her. Both children are very, very smart. They are even smarter because of the control that those 2 terrible people have over them. Flora now has a reason to hate me, and she will continue to until it's all over. What do you mean, all over? She wants her uncle to come and see how terrible a teacher I have been. She wants him to deal with me.
Mrs. Groves seemed to be trying to imagine the children together working toward having me dismissed.
But Miles likes you so much. Yes, maybe he does,
I said with a laugh.
Although he has a very strange way of showing it. The main thing is that Flora very much hates me now. She wants me to go away, and if I won't leave, she wants me taken away. Yes, madam, she does want you to go. Have you come to my room to ask me to leave then?
I did not give Mrs. Groves a chance to answer.
No, I've done a lot of thinking. Although my going away seems like the best idea in the end, it won't help the situation. Instead, you and Flora must go away."
Mrs. Groves looked confused for a moment and said,
"Where would we go?" "The purpose would be to get her far from this house, from those people, and of course, far from me. You should take her to see her uncle." "Why? So she can tell him terrible things about you?" "If that's what she wants to do, then fine. However, I need her away from here so that I can make my friendship with Miles stronger. And I think it will help our friendship as well. I mean, yours and mine. But don't you worry that he will also begin to hate me like Flora? Of course it's possible, but I don't want to just give up. I must at least make an attempt to save him. So please, as soon as you can, take Flora away from here."
I was surprised by the amount of the strength I still had in me. It troubled me that Mrs. Groves did not entirely believe in my strength. She did not seem eager to follow my plan.
"One other important thing I need to tell you,"
I continued.
"The children should not meet for even a second before you leave."
The thought then entered my mind that they might have already met between now and the time Flora had returned from the lake.
"Have they seen each other?"
I asked Mrs. Groves.
"No, madam. Every time I have left Flora alone, I made sure to lock the door behind me. But—"
She stopped for a moment and turned her eyes up toward the ceiling.
"But what? Why do you feel so positive about the boy?" "It's not that I'm completely positive. Nothing is certain in this place. But lately I've noticed a change in him. It seems like he has something he wants to say to me. In the classroom last night, he spent a long time sitting with me in front of the fireplace. I felt that he was trying to get the courage to talk."
Mrs. Groves walked over to the window and looked out at the rain clouds.
"Did he talk?" "No, not a word was spoken. I felt like I need more time with him before he will speak." "How much time?" "Only a couple of days. If I don't succeed, at least I will have tried. Are you willing to go? I need you to trust me."
Mrs. Groves looked down on the ground for a moment and then back up into my eyes.
"All right, I'll do it. In fact, we'll leave today. I agree that she should leave this house. However—" "What?" "I absolutely must leave. The girl has been saying things that have truly upset me. Horrible things. They were things I never would have imagined such a young girl could say." "Oh, that's wonderful to hear. What's so wonderful about it?"
asked Mrs. Groves in surprise.
"It shows that I have been telling the truth all along. Tell me, does she talk about me?" "Oh, yes, and she uses the most horrible words. I can't repeat them. They are so horrible. I wonder who she learned them from."
"Are you joking? I can tell you where she learned them." "Yes, well, maybe I do know after all. Well, madame, I should go back and see how she's doing."
"Then you do believe in the things I've told you about? You believe that Quint and Miss Jessel are trying to get to the children?" "Yes, I do."
Hearing this from Mrs. Groves made me extremely happy. She could support my efforts to help the children now. I would not be on my own after all.
"Oh, but wait. I just thought of something. The letter I sent to their uncle will arrive before you do." "No, it won't. It was not sent." "Why not?" "The boy." "What? You mean Miles did something with it?" "Well, when Flora and I returned from the lake, the letter was no longer on the table. I asked some of the other servants if they had done anything with it, but none of them had ever seen it. So it must have been the boy. I'm sure he has burned it by now. I'm afraid I suddenly understand something,
said Mrs. Groves.
Tell me, what is it? It's obvious now why Miles was dismissed from the school. He must have stolen something.
I thought about this for a moment and said,
Yes, it's possible.
My letter had not contained anything more than a request to speak with their uncle. Miles would not find anything in it to be angry with me about. I now understood why he joined me in the classroom last night. He wanted to admit to me what he had done.
Please then, Mrs. Groves, go with Flora now. I think I can help him. The only way to save him is by getting him to talk about the ghosts. I think he is really ready to talk, but you must go first. Oh, I wish you the best of luck,
said Mrs. Groves, kissing me on the cheek.
We shall go soon.
She then left me alone in the room. Chapter 23. As soon as Mrs. Groves was out of the room, I wished that I had not suggested that she go away. I was a little frightened by the idea of being on my own to face the evil that was trying to control Miles. And when, 2 hours later, I was told that the housekeeper and young Flora had just left the house, I felt more alone than ever before. The workers and servants in the house did not seem to understand what was happening. It was clear that something was wrong by the way that Flora had been first locked in her room, and second, taken away by Mrs. Groves. None of them said a word to me, but I could feel that they were confused and even possibly troubled. I decided then to become very strict and serious with everyone. As I walked about the house, I could not find Miles anywhere, because up until recently, I had always been with the children at all times. It was obvious to the servants that things were different between the boy and me. It was also made obvious by the way we no longer bothered to have class. After breakfast, we usually met in the classroom to begin the day's lessons. Now, however, the servants told me that Miles had gone for a walk by himself. In a way, I was glad that we did not bother to pretend that our classes were useful anymore. For a long time now, I had nothing more to teach the boy. He, of course, felt it too. I was also too troubled by everything to teach well. Starting that day, I would always have dinner with Miles in the dining room, where I had once frightened Mrs. Groves in the window. Everything now was much more formal between the boy and me. It had to be this way. In order to prevent myself from going crazy, I had to turn myself into stone. I had to keep ignoring the fact that I was fighting against something terribly evil. When Miles came into the dining room, he looked at the food on the table. I thought for certain that he was going to make a joke about the main dish, when instead he said, I have to say, I'm a little worried about Flora. Is she seriously ill?
She will be fine after the doctors in London have taken care of her. This house has become unhealthy for her. Please, take a seat and let's eat.
Miles sat down near me with a confused look on his face. But she was taken away so suddenly. I find it hard to believe that the house could so quickly make her ill.
Actually, she had been getting ill for quite a while. It did not happen as suddenly as you think.
Well, why didn't you send her away earlier?
We did not know that her illness would continue for so long. We thought she would get better.
But now, won't traveling make her even more ill?
No, it won't. Her health would have worsened if she had stayed.
Oh. He then gently picked up his fork and knife, and with the best manners possible began to eat. I still did not know the reason for his dismissal from the school, but I did know it was not for bad eating habits. Our dinner was short. As soon as we finished, I asked the servants to clear the table. Miles, meanwhile, stood looking out of the dining room window. Neither one of us spoke while the servants were cleaning. When they finally left the room, the boy suddenly faced me and said, "Ah, now it's just the two of us." Chapter 24.
That's not entirely true, is it?
Well, no, I guess it's not. Others are here as well.
Yes, that's right. There are the others.
But they are not really very important, are they? I could feel my face turning white.
What do you mean by important?
Oh, I don't know. He then turned back around toward the window and looked out at the sad gray November day. I felt at this moment that he could see something that I could not. But he seemed different to me now. He did not look as confident or as happy as before. The idea suddenly came to my mind that he was looking for something out of the window. Was it possible that he was as blind to them as I now was? Was it possible that he could not see them? A feeling of hope suddenly ran through me. Miles then turned away from the window and looked at me. He seemed nervous and troubled. "I'm happy that this house is healthy for me."
Yes, it seems that you have been spending more time getting familiar with the house lately,
I said, trying to keep up my courage. "Truly, I've walked many, many kilometers around the property."
And how do you feel about this new freedom of yours?
A smile appeared on his face. "How do you feel about it?" he said. However, he did not give me time to answer. "Between you and me, I think you are more lonely. I hope being here with me at this house is not too boring for you."
Not at all. Why do you think I continue to work here? I very much enjoy your company.
The look on his face suddenly became more serious, and I felt at that moment that his beauty was greater than ever before. "That's the reason you continue to work here? To be with me?"
Of course. I'd like to stay with you until we can find a good school for you to attend. I told you before, the night that I visited you in your room, that I would do anything to help you.
I remember, but I think you said that because you wanted me to do something.
Yes, that's true. I wanted things to change after that, but they did not change, did they?
But I think what you wanted was for me to talk with you.
Yes, exactly. I wanted, and I still want, for you to tell me what you are thinking about.
So that's the real reason you continue to work here, he said with a laugh. I could hear many different things in his voice now. I could hear anger, but I could also hear somewhere inside of him that he wanted to give in to me. He wanted my help.
I admit that I'm here for that reason.
So you still want me to talk? Right here? Now?
Why not?
His eyes searched about the room suddenly, and for the first time I saw fear in his face. His fear was not of the others, but of me.
I can see that you want to go outside now.
Yes, terribly, he said, suddenly smiling. His hands began to play with the hat he was holding. His discomfort made me feel guilty. Was it right to make such a special child feel so uncomfortable? Looking back, I now see not just how frightened he was of me, but how frightened I was of him as well. We were like two enemies waiting to attack each other. I promise, the boy said. I will talk with you about everything. But I must tell you later.
Why can't you tell me now?
He then looked away from me, back out the window. Not a single sound could be heard in the room. He then turned his eyes to mine and said, I must go speak with one of our servants. He was lying to me again.
Fine, but before you go, I have one favor to ask you.
Yes, what is it?
It's very small, really. Could you tell me if you did something with my letter yesterday?
Chapter 25. Immediately, I went over to him and grabbed his arms. I wanted to keep him facing me, for just moments before, out the window, appeared the figure of Peter Quint. He had been approaching the house while we were speaking, and now he was standing just outside the window. His face looked as white and as evil as ever. I had to keep the boy from seeing him. The fight was now between me and the ghost outside. I had to protect Miles, and this was the only way I could. All that he had to do was tell me everything, and he would be saved. I could see on his forehead that the boy was now sweating. His face was the same color as Quint's, a terrible white. And then I heard something come from deep down inside the boy's throat. I did take your letter. When I heard this, I pulled him closer to me and put my arms around him. His heart was beating very loudly and quickly. The whole time I held him, I never once moved my eyes away from the man in the window. For a quick moment, Peter Quint looked weaker than me. My courage then grew much greater. The man remained in the window, his eyes fixed on the boy and me.
Why did you do it?
I asked the boy. I wanted to read it to see if you said anything bad about me.
Did you read it?
Yes, I did. I could see on his face that he knew something was there with us. However, he did not know exactly what that something was. I then looked back toward the window and was happy to see that Quint was no longer there. I felt that I was more powerful suddenly, and there was nothing that could prevent me from saving Miles.
And what did you find in the letter? What did I say about you?
You said nothing at all about me. Nothing at all. I held him tighter and kissed his face. He was covered in sweat.
Where is the letter now?
It's gone. I destroyed it in the fire.
In the fire?
I decided to take this further.
Did you do the same thing at your school?
What?
Letters. Did you steal letters or anything else?
He seemed to be trying to remember. Eventually, his memory did come back. Are you really asking me if I stole things? I felt ashamed to be accusing such a beautiful, well-behaved boy of such things.
Is that why you couldn't return?
You knew I couldn't return to the school?
Yes, I know much more than you think.
Much more?
Much more. Now tell me what exactly happened there.
I did not take anything from anyone.
But you must have done something.
His eyes searched the ceiling of the dining room, and he took a deep breath. I said something upsetting.
That's it?
It made the schoolmasters angry.
But is that a good enough reason to dismiss you from the school?
I did not think it was serious enough, but I don't know.
Whom did you say these things to?
He tried to think for a moment, but the memory did not seem to come back to him. I can't remember. I should have stopped there, but I was feeling so powerful, so successful, that I could not prevent myself from asking more questions.
Try to remember whom you said these things to.
Something was preventing him from remembering. I can't. I just know that I told my friends. His dismissal now became even stranger to me. Then the idea suddenly came into my head that he might not have done anything wrong. If that were true, then I would feel guilty for having doubted him. I let go of his arms then. His eyes once again returned to the empty window.
Did your friends tell other people what you said to them?
His nervousness seemed to grow as he looked outside at the gray sky. Yes, I suppose they told others. I suppose they told their friends.
And eventually the leaders of the school heard as well.
Yes, he said, turning back around to face me. They found out, I guess. Now that I think about it, what I said was quite terrible.
Please, Miles, tell me what you said.
I then ran over to him and took hold of his arms, for the horrible image of Peter Quint had once again returned to the window. I could see in the boy's eyes that he understood what was happening. I shouted at the face in the window.
Get out of here!
Are you speaking to her? Asked Miles nervously. Is it Miss Jessel? I was shocked to hear him refer to the woman. I answered,
No, it's not her. It's something else. It stands at the window, powerless and with no courage. It appears before us now, but it will never appear again.
The boy became extremely anxious. His face turned white with anger and confusion. Do you mean that he is here?
Who is he?
I asked, looking coldly into the boy's eyes. I can still hear his voice as he said, Peter Quint, where is he? He looked wildly in every corner of the room.
So what if he's here now? He's not important anymore. We have each other now. He has nothing. He is powerless. Look, he is standing there at the window. Look at him.
When I turned toward Miles, he was already looking at the window. However, I could tell that he could see nothing there. And suddenly, he let out a terrible scream as his body fell toward the ground. I managed to catch him. I looked at him there in my arms. The room was silent, and so was his poor little heart. I had lost him.